Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching.
In the window of a passing train, she saw her husband and daughter. The truth was monstrous. There was a dim light in the old fortune teller's house. It was rumored in the village that the fortune teller had long ago turned 100 years old, but she still did not leave her craft. If the rumors about the centenary were true, the grandmother did not look her age at all. Her eyes were full of life. Her fingers nimbly lit candles and laid out cards. She looked intently at the photograph the night visitor held out to her. It showed a happy family, mom, dad, and daughter. "They're alive." "Alive? Heh heh heh," smiled Grandma after a long silence. "I can see they're alive." "And so are you, granddaughter." "You're wrong," Selena shrieked. "I buried them a year ago. I came here to have you confirmed, yes, dead, drowned, lost, so that I could live again. We'll at least try to try. And you're a charlatan, that's what you are." "Alive is alive," Grandma said with a smile. "It's a terrible sin to bury the living. You'll never be able to wash it off, my dear." Her throat tightened with indignation. Her anger seemed to choke her with its fingers. Her shoulders shook with sobs. For a whole year, she could find neither truth nor peace. At that moment, she even raised her hand so that the woman wanted to hit the old woman. But the fortune teller did not kick out the angry guest, but put her hand on Celine's shoulder. "In this village, they say I'm 100 years old," she whispered. "They lie, of course. All people lie. When Grandma Juliana first came here, decades ago, she was already old. In just a few weeks, she had a nice house made of huge logs, a bathhouse for her body, and a small altar for her soul. And then a string of people came here. Some are looking for relatives, others for missing objects, and others for themselves." "I'm sorry," Celine whispered, removing the old woman's hand. "When they were gone, my whole life turned upside down. I feel like I'm in a bad dream all the time, and I can't open my eyes." "Don't apologize, granddaughter," Julian replied. "I've seen it all. I've seen war, and pestilence, and famine. I've seen parents bury their children. Do you have a gift? The ability to see?" the guest asked. She wanted so much to hope that the old woman was right, but deep down she doubted the truth of her words. She wanted to know more. "No gift," the witch doctor exhaled. The late-night conversation was beginning to wear her down. "You see bodies, and I see corporeal ones beneath them. They shuttle between us, swarming, not like flies, but like birds, or like clouds. Are they spirits? Ghosts?" whispered Celine in horror. "You say spirits?" the grandmother replied. "I say helpers. What makes you think they're alive? They've been searching for them. Not for 3 days, not for a week, but for a month. I looked for them myself, personally. I looked everywhere. I looked at everything, my God, everything. It was so scary. And you just looked at the photo and you saw it. How is that possible?" The grandmother sighed. She was beginning to lose patience, which is rare at her age. "How do you explain to a blind person what the sun looks like? You can describe the shape, color, warmth, but it would still be a pale shadow of what the sun really looks like." As soon as she looked at the photo, she saw the whole picture. Deception, betrayal, and true love. "I'm not 100 years old, granddaughter," yawned the fortune teller. "I'm not 100, no." "Please help me," Selena whispered. "Help me. I'll owe you for the rest of my life." "How would it quite help, eh?" Grandmother Juliana suddenly laughed in a hoarse voice, and her laughter made the guest feel frightened. She was reminded of the old women who used to scare naughty children. They invite you into their house, but there is no way out. Selena jumped up and rushed to the door. The sudden movement extinguished the candles, and the room was plunged into darkness. The guest ran through the old woman's house, fumbled for the entrance to the corridor, and it was a long line. She kept running, fumbling with her hands on the walls in search of a handle. But no, only the endless surface, the relief of the huge timbers of which the walls are made. Suddenly a candle was lit in the distance, like a lone star in the sky. The guest obediently returned to her grandmother, her table, and the maps. "How long are you going to run around?" The fortune teller asked sternly. "You'll scare away all my helpers. Don't think you're the only one who's scared. The helpers can sense things too. And worry, you're scaring them, granddaughter, scaring them. It's not good." Selena's hands went cold. It seemed to her that she would never get out of this terrible house, where she had come of her own free will. She would wander in the dark, looking for a way out, or maybe Juliana's grandmother had other plans for her. The old woman kept smiling, and the sight of it sent chills down her spine. "I'm sorry," the guest whispered. "I apologize for calling you a quack. You're not like that, no. You're the real thing, the real thing." "A witch?" the fortune teller said, and then she moved as sharply as if she'd flown across the table. Selena could have sworn that the old woman's face moved toward her separately from her body. Even so, the guest replied defiantly, "I don't care who I go to anymore. I just want to know the truth, and I don't need anything else." "So I'm telling you the truth," Julianne sighed. "Your husband and your daughter are alive. But the truth, you won't like the truth. The truth will disappoint you, granddaughter." The fog was suddenly gone. Selena looked at her phone, 2 o'clock in the morning. In front of her is a tired grandmother who was old before she even came to this village. And her, Selena, with her eternal skepticism. If she wasn't ready to believe the fortune teller, why did she come? Why had she waited her turn in the gazebo for days? She certainly didn't have an answer to those questions. "You shouldn't have buried them," Julianne said. "I shouldn't have. It's a great sin, granddaughter." "How do you know?" Selena wondered. "I didn't say that. I see that the coffins are standing, and the wreaths and lamps have been lit," the fortune teller explained. "But the coffins are empty, and the earth does not accept them." Selena thought her grandmother had a rare gift indeed. That spring, when she had received the death certificates and organized the funeral for her husband and daughter, the ground was really frozen and couldn't be dug up. The ceremony was strange and long. She had never been to the cemetery since then because she didn't believe in it. "What am I to do?" she pondered, wiping away her tears. "If I leave everything as it is, I'll be tormented. And if I start looking, will I be disappointed?" Better disappointed than agonized, Julianne smiled, the demonic light glinting in the corners of her eyes again. "Because the truth is very interesting." "Where do I look for them, grandmother?" Selene asked, wiping away her tears. "I'll tell you all about it," nodded the old woman. To the guest's surprise, all the old woman's teeth were in place. "Go to the station." And as Selene listened to the woman, the hairs on her head stood up. Every expensive hotel has its own fragrance, which should evoke the most pleasant associations with the place. A clock that shows the time in different time zones is a must. This way, the value of the place is immediately increased, and also fresh apples or candy at the reception desk to make the guest feel at home. The hotel, where a handsome man and a little girl entered, had all the trappings of hospitality. "Good afternoon," he said with a slight accent. "We booked a room. I'm not sure I filled in all the fields on the website correctly." "Oh, that American language. What's your name?" the girl at the counter asked helpfully. "Nicholas," the man replied with a smile. "Nicholas Crass. I am traveling with my daughter." "Let me see. Yes, Mr. Nicholas, the registration is valid. Welcome to our hotel. Are you Austrian?" the hotel employee asked with interest. "Oh no, not at all." Nicholas waved his hand. "We're ethnic Americans. We live in the Czech Republic now. I have a small business there." "What brings one to the US?" the woman wondered. "Oh, unfinished business," the stranger explained. "You know, life is so interesting you have to keep looking back. It's useful. Only then you realize that time has passed, and if you don't look back, it will have been wasted. The woman stood with her mouth open. The guest literally charmed her. Such a caring and intelligent man, traveling all alone with a little girl. She looked to be about 6 years old at most. She wanted so much to talk to the stranger some more, to have a cup of coffee or better, a glass of wine. It was as if he read her thoughts, moved as close as the counter allowed, and said confidentially, "Maria usually falls asleep around 10 o'clock at night. Knock on my door twice, I'll come out and we'll take a walk. Maybe show me your hotel, or your soul. You have such deep eyes, I can tell you're a wonderful person." The hotel employee blushed. It seemed she had never been complimented in her life, especially such nice men. Such, but ethnically American, with his own little business. Maybe there would be a job for her, too. On the one hand, she adored New York, her hometown. On the other hand, she wanted to see the world, or at least Europe. "You know," the girl whispered, "my name is Barbara. Just Barbara to my friends." He only smiled in response. It seemed that the guest was doing it out of politeness, but it turned out to be very warmly European. But his eyes, they had the same dark color as the winter forest that came up close to the hotel on one side, and just as cold. As if he had nothing to do with her warm laughter. She felt like she should say something, but she couldn't find the words. "Here's the card," Barbara said. "Your room, with a crib. Just as you ordered. You're on the 3rd floor, Mr. Nicholas." "Thank you very much," he replied in a deep, clear voice. "It's so nice to be back in the motherland. I adore the United States. Nowhere else in the world are there such charming women, and such hard workers." In the commotion, she had completely forgotten to ask Nicholas for his passport. The rules were strict now. The data a guest gave during electronic registration had to be checked and immediately forwarded to the police. But for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to call the man. She'd better go to him at 9 o'clock at night and remind him about the documents. Nicholas was already walking away, holding the hand of his little daughter. They had only one small suitcase on wheels. Barbara almost decided to call the man under some plausible pretext. But then several guests came to the counter, a whole group of travelers. They were back in their hometown. He ordered dinner directly to the room and didn't want to go outside. As the girl fell asleep, there was a knock at the door. He was not mistaken. The porter with the beautiful name of Barbara could not resist his charms. "I've been waiting for you," he said in a voice that made her want to throw herself into his arms. "All my life?" Barbara asked hopefully. "Yes," Nicholas whispered and kissed her gently on the cheek. "The best acquaintances are always casual. You won't have a problem spending some time with me, will you?" "No," the girl smiled. "I've already changed. I can do whatever I want." "I'm glad I met you too, Nicholas." "Please, Barbara," asked the American Setch. "Let's use the first name. I feel like I've known you all my life." Had she known how this encounter would end, she wouldn't have hesitated to rush back behind the counter. "This is crazy. Real crazy," Selena thought as she stood on the platform. Along with the pre-dawn mist, the magic had dissolved, and the inconsolable widow suddenly realized what foolishness she had wasted a whole week of her life on, along with the crumbs of her last money. First, she had taken a bus to Washington, and then spent 24 hours on a train. Then she hitchhiked to the village where Grandma Juliana lived, the legendary Grandma Juliana. After 2 days of waiting, the old woman finally deigned to receive her deep into the night. By this time, Celine's back ached, because for 2 days in a row, she had to sleep in the gazebo on some ridiculous tourist mat. There was not just a line for Julian, but a pilgrimage. "You're lucky," the young man who had set up a tent on the property told her. "I've been waiting for 2 weeks, and I may have to spend another month here." "What are you waiting for?" asked Celine. "I want to learn," the boy replied. "I have a gift." "Do you want me to tell you about you? Your name is Selena, you're from New York." Well, let's just say I told you that yesterday. Good, nodded the pilgrim. You came here to find the killer, but we both know that the real killer is you. The strange guy who discovered the gift of clairvoyance stayed in the tent, and the inconsolable widow had the strangest night of her life. These events now seemed like a dream. Could something like this really happen? Deep down, Selena knew she had to get her head on straight. That since she had suffered such grief, she had to move on. There were still no options. I must live, the woman said, to live for myself and for the memory of them. But is that possible now? The most surprising thing is that Selena, who has been interested in magic and esotericism all her life, had never even heard of Grandma Juliana. But she clung to her as her last hope to make sense of the misfortune that had befallen her family. During the reception, it had indeed seemed to her that the old woman possessed fantastic powers. But now, in the selenium of the day, everything that had happened was doubtful. At the psychic's behest, she must go to the place where the whole story had spun from, to her hometown, where Selena had met the love of her life, experienced the joy of motherhood, and then the grief of loss. Although it had been over a year since she lost Maria and Michael, the wounds in her soul were taking their time to heal. Who knew that an ordinary vacation trip to Chicago would turn into such a terrible tragedy? It was all Michael's fault. He couldn't sit still in one place. He was in some kind of permanent movement, always ready to go somewhere, to do something and create. Why didn't I go with them? The woman questioned. Why didn't I go missing too? Selena couldn't make sense of her feelings and couldn't figure out whether she missed her husband or her daughter more. Probably both. In the days of her misfortune, she dropped everything and flew to Chicago. She traveled to every hospital, cemetery and morgue, visited dozens of offices. It seems that for the month that she spent by the sea, not even once did not even sleep a wink. All in vain. Michael and Maria had vanished into thin air. Why should she go back to New York? Only recently Selena had fled from this city on the Neva in shame and despair. In her heart she realized Michael was gone and so was Maria. Along with them, her quiet life and sleep and rest flew away. The search required a lot of money. She had to mortgage the apartment. This sum was spent on private detectives, lawyers, clairvoyance, all in vain. She couldn't show herself to her parents either. Her mother still blamed her for letting her granddaughter go on vacation alone with her father. Who knew you could disappear without a trace in Chicago? But there was one thing that did give her hope. After all, neither husband nor daughter's bodies were ever found, which means they might have survived, so there's still a chance. The car Michael had rented before he died had its front windows open. He must have fought to the last man, Selene thought. What a man! If they had left the car, they might have survived. After the incident, she was horrified to learn that such stories of cars being swept out to sea were not uncommon. She just never thought something like this could happen to her family. Until the last moment, she believed in the best. At the provincial train station, she saw the same guy who had spent so many days in a tent waiting for an audience. Selena turned away, but he had already spotted her and started waving. He ran up, despite his weighty backpack. "Hello," he said. "What, are you coming back?" "Yes," Selena nodded. "I'd like to be alone." "Can you imagine what my grandmother said?" The boy continued, ignoring her words. "She says I don't have any powers." "You quack. Probably just afraid of competition." "What did she tell you?" "It's nothing," Selene replied and waved her hand. She still hoped that Michael had simply lost his memory and that Maria was too young to tell her anything about herself, and that they would meet again. Her mind told her to just accept the loss and move on with her life. She was still young. She could still have a new family, children. But the pain of loss seemed unbearable. Almost all the way to DC, she was entertained by this strange guy, talking about how he'd felt different since he was a kid. that people didn't understand him and were afraid of him, that he could read minds and see the future through his hands and eyes. Selena even agreed to let him read her fortune, for that he had to sit on the side, and a few stations before Washington. A vision, he said suddenly, and the guy's eyes really did turn glassy. Seeing your world changing, how what you think is true becomes a dream. An officer with gold epaulets comes out of a glass door and takes you prisoner. Selena laughed, so amused by this performance. Her grandmother had been right. The traveling companion had no powers. What's his name, by the way? Waking up, the boy pretended to be very confused. He gathered his things, threw a huge backpack on his shoulders, and jumped out of the train. Selena smiled even wider. It wasn't until she got off at the train station in Washington, D.C., that she suddenly realized why this young psychic had decided to run away. And the realization of the truth made her want to cry. For the fourth day in a row, Barbara flew with happiness. She'd never left the walls of her home hotel. Why should she go home when she had a family of her own, almost her own? After all, in her 30s, she was not even married. Even a serious relationship seemed fantastic to her. Maybe it had something to do with her temperament. Barbara did not know how to demand or even ask, but could only hint. Maybe her loneliness was due to her work. 12-hour shifts completely deprived her of strength. And of course, one could always meet an interesting man for a one-night stand in a hotel. At first, she thought it was something shameful, but then she accepted it. After all, a fleeting relationship is better than no relationship at all. Still, her soul was still dreaming, if not of a prince, then at least of an interesting man who would take her away. It's impossible to have a relationship in this city, Barbara complained to her friends. Everyone is married, a drug addict, a gambler, or a cheapskate. I don't know which is worse. They just shrugged their shoulders. Everyone she had studied with years ago at the hospitality college had husbands and children. And some even had second-circle families. And only Barbara had had no luck on the love front, with only setbacks and defeats. Now that was about to change. Nicholas turned out to be a terrific man, intelligent, caring, well-read. It's as if he came from another reality. His daughter was incredibly well-mannered and polite. She dressed herself, washed her own clothes, and generally behaved much older than her 6 years. On the second day, Barbara replaced her new family's room, taking advantage of her opportunities. Nicholas was now living in an apartment with 2 rooms for the same money, and in one of them, they could spend the night together without the risk of embarrassing the girl. Barbara had to leave the room at 6 in the morning so that no one would notice them together. The hotel used to have its own security service, but the coronavirus and the tourism crisis that followed had forced the management to cut costs. Barbara knew the cameras on the floor were just for show, so she wasn't afraid of being exposed. Harry, a hotel owner in historic New York City, upon learning of the affair, would describe her behavior this way. This is inconsistent with the high standards of our institution. It is unacceptable to engage with customers. On the other hand, if the guest made the first move, you should have politely declined or quit the hotel. Barbara could hear her boss's voice in her head. Luckily, Harry was visiting his brainchild less and less often and was busy with other projects. The other employees, if they noticed Varia's unusual activity, didn't pay much attention. And who would judge her? Sophia, her replacement, who, because of the frenzied pace of work, also had a troubled personal life. Or the cooks and bartenders, who were changing at an unbelievable rate. The main question on Barbara's mind was how long this fairy tale would last. Would Nicholas take her with him to the Czech Republic? Or would he buy an apartment here, move in, and the 3 of them would live together like a real family? When she had a day off, she decided to give Nicholas and his daughter a tour of New York. She took them through the streets of the city. They saw the Statue of Liberty. "Here, it's the Statue of Liberty," she said. Then she showed them her favorite places, not the parade routes that tourists often take. Her favorite canteen, where she could taste wonderful food without paying a lot of money. I wanted to show him the room I rented with my girlfriend, but I was afraid. What if he liked it better? Nicholas was gorgeous, and she fell in love like she'd never fallen in love before. But his eyes, there was a sadness in them, a tragedy, and every day Barbara was closer to finding it. The girl sometimes withdrew into herself, and when she called to her, there were tears in the children's eyes. Nicholas, when Barbara had once casually said something about Mary's mother, had gotten all tense and asked to change the subject. It was obvious that the charming Setch didn't have a wife. At least not now. Of course, Barbara would have liked to know the truth, but curiosity wasn't that strong. If it's a family secret, if it's not customary to talk about it, let it be. Someday they'll tell it themselves. The young woman was more interested in another matter. Sooner or later Nicholas would finish his business in the United States, and then what? It was necessary to hint that she might be useful in Europe. She was learning German and French. She could take care of the girl while he was at work. But having this conversation and getting over herself seemed unrealistic. How could she get over herself? How to transcend this natural modesty that almost broke her life? In the evening, when Nicholas had put the girl to bed, he went outside to see her. The two of them walked to the coffee shop next door and got themselves drinks. How long had it been since Barbara had been home? Or was her home now not where she thought it was at all? The conversation, the sweet compliments, and little caresses went on for a very long time. I think Maria has already fully accepted me, stretched out Barbara, blushing. Where to? Wondered Nicholas. To the family. To your family? The girl whispered and closed her eyes in embarrassment. Oh, you're so good, the man said, hugged her tightly and kissed her. Of course she did. She's had such a hard time dealing with the loss. Please never, ever remind her about her mother. It's a sore subject with us. Forbidden. During the next walk, he bought her a beautiful and expensive scarf. She had never worn anything like it, of course, but she put it on immediately to please the man. Nicholas gave her a charming smile. Barbara, he said, I have a proposition for you. It may sound strange, but listen to the end of it. The young woman brightened. She knew that Europeans were quick to make decisions, but was she really that quick? No, she would not take his last name. She would keep her own, but their future children. I'm all ears, whispered the young woman. Barbara, just listen to the end, okay? Nicholas continued. Maria and I are in trouble, and we're going to do something that's going to get us out of this cycle of bad luck. You have to, As the man recounted his plan, his new pastor felt more and more like the heroine of a spy movie, a real thriller. The request for help caused Barbara some apprehension, and she even thought of refusing at first. However, if he would really take her with him to Europe, it could be a risk. An interrogator sounds proud, much better than a district inspector or an internal duty officer. Despite the proud title, Alston hated his current job. All day long, he spent his days circling New York City, conducting pointless interviews with people, and making equally useless rulings. He was in his 30s, captain stars falling on his shoulders, but there was no promotion. It was his own fault. He himself had chosen the dusty job of interrogation, which was dominated by meaningless and useless labor. A man died in the street. His heart stopped. He had to check if a crime had been committed. Even if he was already 90 years old, even if he was a regular at the cardiologist, a man chokes at home in front of witnesses, and the expert confirms it. Do me a favor, interview everyone involved, including neighbors. Even if the medical examiner swears there are 2 cases a week in his neighborhood. A woman with a broken nose went to the hospital, quickly run to her home, question her about whether she suffers from domestic violence. Checks, rulings, orders. and it would be fine if the duties of the inquirer would end there. But no. At least once a week, he had to be on duty at some event or concert, to keep order while the rest of us rested. He wistfully remembered the coronavirus when there was no crime or public events. At least once a week, standing convoy in court. An interrogator had no life, just a job. The only thing that could cheer Austin up at all was an interesting case. He'd had a few of those in his career, but not very often. Usually he felt that some trivial assignment was in danger of turning into something worthwhile. But even then, alas, there were limits. As soon as you come up with an interesting crime, the material will be immediately taken away from you, either by the investigation or by the prosecutor's office. They need it more. Austin, the boss, walked into the office without knocking. Drop everything, there's an urgent errand to run. Austin adjusted his glasses, a gesture he used deliberately to keep from saying too much. If he did, his bonus would be forfeited, and his meager salary would become a pittance. There was no work in the inquest except urgent work. The ruling he was typing now should have been issued 3 days ago. And the answer still had to be coordinated with the head of the line department. That's right, Austin replied. I'll just print out the ruling, or the prosecutor's office will send us another happy letter. What have you got there? The supervisor asked, peering unceremoniously into the monitor. Oh yes, the accident. Your accident can wait, Austin. Look where the assignment came from. Right there. The colonel proudly pointed to the envelope and the document, the 3-letter abbreviation, which the police preferred not to say aloud, inspired respect. But if this assignment was sent down to their level, it means that there can't be anything alive there. It was just another response and a useless check. All right, Austin nodded. I'll send the resolution later. But, Conrad Colonel, if anything happens, I'll blame you. If there are any problems with the ruling, no more bickering, said the chief. You see what kind of cases I'm assigning you. Not just anything, but insurance fraud. Do you have any idea what that is? Austin adjusted his glasses again. For some reason, the colonel considered everyone below him in rank and position to be feeble-minded. The trouble was that Austin really liked his profession, except that he wanted to investigate more than accidental deaths and age-related deaths, where everything was clear. Insurance? The interrogator interjected. There's even a separate article in our code for this. Well done. I never doubted you, said the colonel. Pay attention. Secret. That's how much I trust you. Don't show anyone either the assignment itself or what you dig up. Sign here in the journal. Your deadline is 3 days. When the chief left the office, Austin decided to finish writing the resolution. He printed it out and took it to the clerk's office. Here in the department, any documents had to be transmitted only through trained people. Then he returned to the order. I read the dry text. In principle, the task could be accomplished not only in a day, but in 5 minutes, without leaving the office. But how do they write? Dry, bureaucratic language. Austin read aloud the fragment that was the worst perceived. As a result of the investigation of illegal activities of insurance companies, the senior investigator of the investigation department found. So, investigation. The interests of the widow of Nicholas Mertz are represented by a lawyer with an expired license. The beneficiary must be thoroughly interviewed, and it must be ascertained that his application was valid. In fact, all he has to do is make a report of the interrogation of one single person. And since the investigator assigned it to the district inquiry, there's really nothing to catch. The woman must have been searched for, but either not found or she refused to go somewhere and explain anything. But what language, motherfucker? Who is a beneficiary? The inquirer thought. Someone who gains a benefit. Then why not write widow? Austin knew the answer to that question very well. Whoever had drafted the document wanted to appear very clever, so that the executor would have to type a new word into Google, to find out its meaning. The whole query was full of just such turns that could be simplified. This is the trademark style of those who want to appear smarter than they really are. What happened to her husband? The inquirer said aloud. He found a ruling in the database. There was a whole investigative team working on it. It turns out that the arrogant Nicholas Mertz, ignoring the warning of the storm, went with his daughter to some tourist site in Chicago. Both were washed out to sea. What a drama! The coroner imagined he was the one assigned to investigate such a case. In a separate file, Austin typed the surnames, first names, and patronymics of all the people involved and entered them into a table. It appeared that Selena had been left all alone after the tragic accident. She used to be registered in their neighborhood, but now, according to the real estate database, the woman had gotten rid of the apartment. She must have changed her cell phone, and she certainly wouldn't want to talk to some interrogator and spill her guts about how she'd hired a lawyer with an expired license. Nicholas Mertz was a strange man too. Shortly before his marriage, he had changed his last name for something. He used to be Kearns. Paradoxically, neither the first nor the second name in the databases had nothing at all. No cell phone, no driver's license, no employment records, no medical records. It was as if he didn't even exist. Very interesting, Austin said aloud and continued his search. So, this Mertz was born in Berlin, but under the third name Ivanov. This was evident from the information about his parents. They must have served in the Soviet army and been sent to Germany. The lucky ones. Who would now remember that Soviet soldiers had left the center of Europe a little over 30 years ago? This same Nicholas must have somehow managed to stay in Germany. Maybe his mother was an ethnic German. There were no answers, but the story fascinated him. Anyway, he found his death in the United States. Austin was already preparing to write a report that it was impossible to establish Selena Litkina's whereabouts. She had been evicted from her apartment. Her neighbors did not know her new phone number. She had no relatives in the USA. But as soon as he dialed the phone, there were long beeps in the receiver. And when a woman's voice answered, Austin was even a little confused. The train was already approaching the Washington station when suddenly, where had her wallet disappeared to? She was sure to take it out and put the ticket in there. Robbed, Selena shouted, wiping away her tears. They took the last of the money. She was consoled by the conductor and a fellow traveler, giving her advice. In the purse that the psychic had stolen, there were credit cards already useless, discount cards, and $300 was the rest of her finances. What's she gonna do now? Good thing she'd stashed one bill. Nothing is nothing, the conductor said, putting her hand on the girl's shoulder. We'll get off at once and write a statement. We'll find this bastard. We'll find him, that's for sure. I've already buried my family, the girl wailed. And now this. There is no justice on earth. After getting off the train, the woman actually walked towards the police room. But something made her freeze. Standing on the platform of the station, Selena realized with horror that madness was coming to her. How else to explain that in the window of the train, which was about to move, she saw Maria. The girl stood with her face pressed against the glass, looking at something on the platform. If it was a ghost, it was a very strange one. Because Maria was much older than the girl she remembered. Selena sobbed, covering her eyes with her hand. Now she would see her daughter everywhere. She would go completely insane, and she would never be able to go back to normal. She should never have gone to that fortune teller. Madness is contagious. Once you touch it, you'll come back again and again. The old woman must have behaved in such a way that she would come back again and again to spend the night in the gazebo, lying on the mat. The woman looked up. The vision had only worsened. Now Michael was standing beside Maria, also looking at the platform. This ghost had changed a little too, a different hair color. When they lived together, her husband asked her to call him Peter in the European manner, which amused Selena. They loved each other so much. She wanted to push the fog away from her, but it wouldn't go away. Tears filled her eyes. The horn sounded and the train started, picking up speed. Maria and Michael's ghosts were leaving for New York on the Sapsan. Selena changed her mind about going to the police station, and since she had almost no money left, she had to buy the cheapest ticket on a regular train. The one that takes forever to move and stops wherever it goes. That solved another problem though. She'd arrive early in the morning and could walk around all day before returning to her parents' house. Call. Interrogator Austin, line division, said a man's voice. Am I speaking to Selena Litkin? Yes, the woman replied. My purse was stolen, but I didn't report it. The conductor must have told you. You stole a wallet? The interviewer was surprised. Then go to the nearest police station immediately. I can take care of it myself. Selena cut her off. What are you calling about? You see, said the policeman, I have an important errand to run, and I need to question you. Are you ever in New York? Yes, Selena answered, trying to speak calmly. I actually live there. The thing is that in the database the apartment is registered to another person, the interrogator said. That's why I thought you had moved. It's not the only apartment, Selena said. So what did you want? She liked the policeman's voice, so deep and raspy. It could only belong to a very brave man. Could you visit me today? He asked. I'll be there until 8 o'clock this evening, but I can stay longer than that. Let's do it tomorrow, Selena suggested. First thing in the morning. Dictate an address. For some reason, her mood improved. The woman wanted to meet this interrogator with a beautiful voice, to go somewhere with him. Probably, if such a man were around, she would never have had her phone stolen in her life. Washington was still herself, a gloomy, bustling, and unfriendly city. There was no room for love, tenderness, or romance, if it weren't for death. Their relationship had long since reached an impasse, a dead end from which there was no escape, no return. She knew it, but there was nothing she could do about it. Selena kept putting off a serious conversation, and then it was too late. Michael was gone, though her heart refused to accept it and kept insisting that he was alive. Nicholas was secretly proud of himself. His ability to improvise always allowed him to solve the most difficult problems. And now, going to New York from the Czech Republic, he only in general terms imagined how to take the money. His own money, by the way, earned in a relatively honest way. But as he got closer to his goal, the plan became clearer and clearer. Man has no path, there is only a goal, he told himself. Alas, there was no one to share his criminal achievements with. All hope on the charming Maria, who was growing up next to him. Yes, he would definitely be able to teach her his craft. For that, she would have to learn and understand a lot. He'd like her to be involved in operations where there's little risk. Otherwise, she'd get addicted to adrenaline like he did, and then she wouldn't be able to do without it. Yesterday he was Peter, and before that Archie, and before that Victor. But the last time, faking his own death was harder. Yes, he wanted to leave Selena. He was sick and tired of her. But what about Maria? It wasn't the girl's fault. He wanted to take his daughter with him. The plan was complex, daring and risky, and so it worked. For the whole world, they were dead. Of course, he should have done it earlier, when Maria was 2. He was getting too many questions about her mom. The girl at first refused to believe that Celine had betrayed them, but in time, he convinced the child. Besides, the girl liked traveling, flying on the plane, and she didn't have to strain herself to get into character. Nicholas noticed that with a child, documents are not checked as carefully as if he was traveling alone. Now the final push and the big score was in their pocket. Sometimes it happens that fate itself puts signs in your path. You just have to look at them and take them for yourself. And yesterday, as soon as he saw a pretty woman, tactfully called a girl, at the reception desk, he realized that it was fate. She looked too much like her. Did he love Selena? Initially, he needed her for another scam that would only be conquered by a family man. Then he made the mistake of getting too deep into the role. But everything went even better than desired. Not only pulled off the case, but also became a happy father. So fate sent him Barbara like it did Selena. A beautiful, intelligent, gentle girl. Also shy and modest. The kind that fell in love with him especially quickly. We'll have to use it, Nicholas thought. And then, well then what? Throw it away, trample it, erase it from my memory. Austin had a great memory for faces. If he saw a person once, he could easily find him in a crowd. The main thing was to remember when and for what purpose the person was needed. The inquirer liked to go to work on foot, all the more so because the department was not far from the room that had become his temporary shelter 5 years ago and then became permanent. Walking not only saved some of his modest salary, one could enjoy the sights of New York. This beautiful and gloomy city was one of his greatest affections. Today's story was still on his mind. What a villainous fate, so ruthlessly dealt with a handsome man and a girl. Walking home past the seafront, in front of the popular hotel with the poetic name North Wind, Austin saw an idyllic picture. At a table sat, as it seemed to him, a couple in love. Except, where had he seen the man's face? The interrogator stopped to get a better look at the family. He had to cross the road. I have so much to do. Austin thought, I have to run this stupid errand, and then I have to do the inspections over and over again. But he crossed the road anyway. Coffee cost a fortune in a place like this, but cigarettes were the same price as in the store. The pack of his favorite brand was running out, so he decided to do something useful, both to buy cigarettes and to satisfy his curiosity. But when Austin approached, he saw something amazing and couldn't believe his eyes, and he was glad he wasn't wearing a police uniform. I'll get her out, the interrogator thought, pulling out his cell phone. Luckily, it was the cell phone he'd used to call Selena. The call went off. Trying not to give away his excitement, Austin stared at the woman beside the man he had identified without error, Nicholas Mertz. Strange man, Celine thought. They seemed to have agreed that she would visit the department early in the morning, but a few hours later, Austin dialed her again around 10 o'clock at night while she was shaking in a train car and asking some stupid questions. Now his voice wasn't so appealing anymore. The policeman, on the other hand, was waiting for his guest the way something very good waits. Interrogators are always at the bottom of the law enforcement hierarchy. Austin had heard condescending remarks directed at him so often over the years that he should have gotten used to them, but not this time. Fate gave him a unique chance to prove that he was worth something too, or maybe a step higher. Suddenly, the door opened without knocking. I'm probably at a bad time. At the threshold of the office stood a woman who was still quite young and pretty. According to the instructions, everyone who comes to the office must be noted by the inspector on duty. Clarify the purpose of the visit and call the calling party. Apparently, Celine had managed to get in unnoticed. Come in, he said to his guest. Have a seat. What do I owe you? She asked. Not only did you called twice. I'm very intrigued by you. Instead of answering, Austin pulled out his phone, on which he took several pictures of Nicholas, or whatever his name is, with his family. Zoomed in on the face of the woman with the scarf. Looked like Selena, but definitely not her. Or was this all a con man's cunning plan? Austin didn't trust anyone. Tell me please, the interrogator began. Where is your husband now? The guest's face turned crimson. She seemed angry, but she held back. Then hope flashed in her eyes. Then distrust. The silence lengthened, but Austin decided not to break it. How else would he get this lady to come clean? I don't know. Selena exhaled. I buried him over a year ago. But the coffin was empty. They say his car was swept out to sea by a wave. Patience ran out, and the guest began to sob. She wailed so much that Alex looked in from the next room to make sure no one needed help. Austin made a gesture with his hand. Got away. The guest calmed down. So you haven't seen your spouse since the day he went missing? The police officer continued his inquiry. At that moment, Selena's anger reappeared on her face. She jumped up from her chair, ran right up to Austin, and blasted him in the face. I knew, of course, that not the most intellectually gifted people go into the service. But this, I couldn't have imagined it. My husband is missing, along with my little girl. Your colleagues investigated the case. Wasn't it hard to ask for the files? Austin adjusted his glasses. It was hard for him to keep a nonchalant expression on his face, but it was worth it. He was trying to figure out if it was possible to play that kind of emotion. Probably not. I requested it, the inquirer replied. The case is still open. Then why all these silly questions? The woman shouted. To make me suffer. At this point, the interrogator realized that the exegesis could be stopped. If she was acting, she was very talented. But most likely, Selena really didn't know anything about her husband's fate. Besides, the policeman really wanted to brag about his talents and luck. After all, how else to explain his fantastic luck? I believe your spouse survived, the interrogator said in a nonchalant tone. Really? The woman asked hopefully and wiped away her tears. But why? Why do you think so? Because I found it, Austin smiled and held out his phone to her. Here, look. Selena looked at the screen and the world around her swam. It was a good thing she was sitting up, or she would have collapsed to the ground. She easily recognized Nicholas, her pet, though his appearance had changed a bit. Though his hair was new and his nose looked a little longer, it was him. The oval of his face, his eyes, his mouth, the same one who had complimented her relentlessly and swore eternal love. It can't be, whispered Celine. It can't be. And you don't recognize this woman? The interrogator asked. He zoomed in on the screen in front of the stranger's face. She didn't even catch Selena's eye right away. There was a woman looking at her from the screen who reminded her of someone. Who? White hair, red-rimmed glasses. Oh, that's... Oh my God! Selena wondered, wiping her hair. It's me, isn't it? I mean, she looks like me. It can't be. This lady must have kidnapped them. She's pretending to be me, playing me for a fool. We need to apprehend her now. You need to apprehend her now. I'll prove that I'm the real Selena. The interrogator coughed and adjusted his glasses. On the one hand, he wanted to laugh. On the other, he had to keep his temper in check. He had almost solved the crime that would finally get his career off the ground. It was a string of atrocities. I have some bad news for you, Selena, Austin exhaled. Your ex-husband is not who he says he is. He's a talented con man. No, replied the visitor. It's a mistake. It's an accident. Come on, arrest this woman. Arrest her immediately. You can see she's a divorcee. Understand, I am a simple interrogator, the policeman said. Of course, I have no experience in investigating such cases, but I doubt your word very much. All indications are that Peter Mertz is the real liar here. By the way, he has a different name now. The guest began to sob again. The interrogator was surprised at her reserve of emotions. He himself could not have reacted so violently to such news. Of course, he should have drawn up a protocol of interrogation, a report, recorded the photo on disk, and sent it all to the investigation as soon as possible. Better yet, detain Peter. I don't understand anything anymore, the woman said. And by the way, I have deceived you. I have absolutely nowhere to stay in St. Petersburg. I have no apartment anymore. Here's what we'll do, Celine, Austin said after a brief thought. His plan wasn't flawless, of course, but it seemed reasonable. For the first time since Michael's disappearance, she felt interested in and attracted to a man. His proposal made Selena blush, and she thought that she could hardly hold herself back. Selena heard a drunken voice from down the long hallway. "He's brought a woman, finally." "Never mind," Austin said, showing her the direction. "That's right, the locals. That's right. Hey, no attention, beautiful stranger," shouted the drunken man. "Pashka, well done, way to go." The interrogator blushed thickly. He rented a room in a relic of a bygone era. Selena looked with interest at one of the last of the St. Petersburg communal houses. High ceilings, carved windows, moldings and peeling potty, and skeins of wires running along the walls, and the musty smell of a room that needs to be renovated, but is easier to tear down. "I'm still lucky," Austin smiled as they walked in. "There's no mold in my room. Make yourself comfortable." Selena looked around. Finding a spare seat in this room was no easy task. There was a couch along the longest wall. Opposite it was an old closet. The rest of the room was occupied by a desk with a computer and some sort of kitchenette. Both the floor and the glass had not been cleaned for a long time. Austin blushed even more as he intercepted his guest's gaze, who was scrutinizing the dirt and grease. "It's just temporary," he said. "Here, I'm taking it off until they give me a work permit." "How long has it been out?" Selena asked out of politeness. "It's been 6 years," shrugged the interrogator. "How do we do it?" "First it's the cops, then family." "What, they don't give it at all?" asked the guest. "No," Austin answered and blushed again. "Is it still about the apartments?" She smiled. It was a weak joke, but it was something. Selena looked at the policeman because there was nothing else to look at. A good-looking man, neat and intelligent. It must be hard for him to work in the police force. Can't even get a decent apartment. I wish he had a wife. "I'm sorry for the details, but I'm after the road," Selena said. "I need to wash up." "Come on, I'll walk you out," the policeman offered. "We've got an old house here, and there's no chance of anything happening." In the communal room, there was a large kitchen block, and just behind it were showers and toilets. It was possible to wash behind a curtain with no doors or latches. She was a little embarrassed, but she still had no choice. The last time she had washed herself properly was 3 days ago at a roadside inn. "I could get a room," Selena said timidly, "if I'm embarrassing you." No, not at all," replied the policeman. "Don't worry, I'll turn around. Besides, you can't see anything through the curtain anyway." In fact, Selena couldn't get a room. The money had been stolen, and the remaining sum wouldn't even be enough for a bed in a hostel. She couldn't even think of what to do next. She couldn't pay back the loan after she mortgaged the property. Go back to her parents. No, we need to get to the bottom of this whole story first. Is her daughter really alive? Selena turned on the water. The faucet made a sound like devils howling from the underworld. She remembered the mysterious visit to the fortune teller, after which she had decided to return to New York. Her grandmother Julianne had been right. Was it luck, coincidence, or a secret gift? The water from the faucet was barely warm, but Selena still felt pleasure. She was washing away not only the dirt, but also the past. Soon she would get her daughter back, find answers to all her questions, and live happily ever after. "I wonder," Selena thought, "is that man looking at me through the curtain? Staring?" There was no mirror here, but she realized that she looked good. Constant movement and lack of appetite had given her back her slim figure. She had naturally nice hips and neat breasts, and a pretty face too. Perhaps this flush policeman could solve one more of her problems, not just give her a place to sleep. "Austin," Selena said, peeking out from behind the curtain, "pass me a towel." The interrogator glanced at her, adjusted his glasses, and blushed again. She herself made her breasts appear from behind the curtain, as if by accident. Let him look around and appreciate his good fortune. Selena wiped herself all over, applied scented oil to her body, and put on fresh linen. She had to put her jeans and blouse back on. since the way to her room was across the hall. "What a blessing," she said when they got back to the room. "Austin, what are you doing for dinner?" "Well," the interrogator stretched out, "I usually eat a bun with kefir, and you, if you want, you can boil your own pasta. Or buckwheat. I've got a lot of stuff to choose from, don't be shy." Selena opened the bachelor's refrigerator. Not much. Chicken eggs, melted cheese, and in the freezer there was a chicken fillet. Pasha had a multi-cooker in his room, surprisingly clean. He probably didn't use it very often. Selena finally chopped the frozen fillet, fried it, then added water and boiled the pasta right in it. When the water evaporated, she cracked a chicken egg into it and tossed in some cheese slices. It was good. "It's delicious," said Austin, eating the pasta with delight. "It's delicious." You see, Austin, what one woman can do. Cook a meal and warm a bed. "No, I'll go to a friend's place," the interrogator said embarrassedly. "I have a friend living in the next room. He has a bunk bed. And you sleep. Don't be shy." "Don't be silly," Selena said. "I can see that this couch folds out. I can cook more than just pasta, you know." She hugged his arm and began rubbing his muscles. The cop appeared to be a trained pleasant to hold, but Austin gently reached his hand out. Then she put her arm around his shoulders and tried to fondle him. "No," he said. "No, you don't. I can't do that." "Am I ugly?" Selena said indignantly. "You don't like me." "You do," Austin replied. "It's just, I'm at work. Why don't you guys go to bed? I'll be right back." Embarrassed, he stalked out of his room. Yes, this was not how he had envisioned an evening in the company of this woman. But no, one must not give in to temptation, work first. In the evening, he had sent an urgent request to the insurance company and would soon receive a reply. He also requested the details of all the guests at the hotel with the poetic name. There was only one man and a girl. That's how Austin got the con man's new name. This crook would hardly wait long. Every new day was a risk for him. Walking towards the showers, Austin slammed himself on his pocket. He had forgotten his phone in the room. He thought it was no big deal, but he was wrong. Insurers are fat cats, Nicholas liked to tell his daughter Maria. "If you only knew how much money they make from our fears." "Fear of what?" the girl asked. She was bright, of course, but not as bright as her father would have liked to think. "On the fear of death," explained Nicholas. "Loss, bankruptcy. But that's okay, baby. I'll pay them back for all the wrongs done to me. You'll see, they'll make a movie about me. Your daddy's a real hero." "Daddy, why did you change your name?" the girl asked. "I told you it was a big secret," hissed the man, clearly losing patience. "Please don't bring it up. Daddy's name is Nicholas, okay? His plan is on the home stretch. Now, all that's left to do is cash out. Some might say this scheme is crazy. It started with a standardized plan. Insure himself and his daughter for a tidy sum. All inclusive. Accident or natural disaster. Overseas or domestic maximum coverage. Then fake your own death. And your daughter's death, of course. The next thing was interesting. His wife knew nothing about his devious plan or his supposed death. What's more, she didn't even know about the insurance. All correspondence with the company after the accident was handled by Mickey's lawyer. And if the company had decided to contact the widow, everything would have fallen apart. But the con man knew that wouldn't happen. Even an experienced investigator wouldn't recognize this man as Nicholas, or Peter, for that matter. Instead of a thick head of hair, an unsightly bald spot. A ridiculous belly that's about to rip a button out of his shirt. Then there's the freckles, the blue eyes, the jutting jaw. "Could you please come to the office?" his employee politely asked him over the phone. "Oh," Mickey replied, "my client has no money at all. And my time, costs a lot of money. But we need a personal presence." The employee did not back down. "I apologize. but I sent all the documents, the lawyer said. In addition, according to Article 28, Paragraph 1, and Nicholas began to recite from memory the legal provisions according to which communication with the insurer can be conducted remotely. That the client has a right to privacy, which is why he hired a lawyer. That you should respect other people's feelings. The employee on the other end of the line sighed, but kept her line. You see, said the girl, it is required by the security service. Look carefully, it's written in the contract. Mickey only smiled slyly. He had foreseen this scenario a long time ago. He'd been prepared for it for a long time. Well, the lawyer sighed. Let's do it this way. Next week, when I have a window between trials, I'll let you know. In advance, of course. But that kind of mistrust, of course, makes it impossible for me to speak favorably of your company from now on. Mickey's a highly sought-after lawyer, so it was up to the head of the benefits department to accommodate him. A very busy man, he was only able to visit the office on Wednesday, the third day after he and his daughter arrived in New York. You should see the way Mickey moves. He's got the walk of a winner, a master of life. The kind of man who can afford to look the way he wants to look. I don't have much time, the lawyer said together with a greeting as he entered the office. Have you done the paperwork yet? Yes, of course, the man replied. You realize how much money this is, even for our company. Ho ho ho, laughed Mickey. Tell me something about the big money. I know your whole company like the back of my hand. How you like to challenge even the tiniest payout in court. Yes, but try to get a word in edgewise with the insurer. I'm still surprised you didn't make my client swear on the Bible. The lawyer pressed him. The man had suffered such grief. Luckily, I did a legal review of the contract myself. There were no grounds for refusal. It's about a client, the department head said, as soon as his guest was silent for a second. She has to sign the documents herself. It's a security requirement. If you don't agree, go to court. There was silence. Mickey weighed the words of his interlocutor on his fingertips. Well, said the lawyer to the head of the benefits department, my client is depressed with grief. I don't know if she can come in person. Give me 1 minute, I'll call her. Without waiting for an answer, the lawyer went out into the corridor. From behind the door, the insurer could hear the lawyer explaining something emotionally to his interlocutor. His voice was beautiful and well practiced, so you wouldn't want to argue. 5 minutes later, the door opened again. I talked. It's just a formality, the insurance company representative said. All she has to do is sign and she'll get her money. Right away. Oh, there you go, stretched out Mickey. I talked the client into it. Yes, it's quite possible. But I'm begging you, please be considerate. A man has lost the most precious thing in his life, his husband, and his daughter, of course. And then there's this. Yes, yes, said the delighted insurer. Selena insists that the $100 million must be given in cash. Contact the bank and have them encash the amount in the largest denominations. But the warden was surprised. It's not a storage facility, actually. I insist, the lawyer said firmly. She wants to carry kilos of money, for God's sake. It's not your concern, and I will take the denial of this small request of an inconsolable widow as a personal insult. Let me know when you're ready, I've got to go. Mickey didn't even shake his hand, but walked toward the door with a victorious gait. Soon he would receive a tidy sum and head back to his hideout in the Czech Republic. Nicholas, alias Peter, alias Mickey, was sure that his plan was doomed to success. If only the con man could know how wrong he was. Using his powers of authority and a semi-secret assignment, Austin got the whole story. So, this Nicholas Peter wants to pull off a noble scam. He faked his own death, and to avert suspicion from himself and the death of his daughter. He took out an insurance policy so his wife wouldn't even know about it. He corresponded on behalf of the lawyer and made it look as if the inconsolable widow herself did not want to see anyone. What a hard worker, The interrogator said with delight. Yes, he deserves respect. I'm sure the scam wasn't the only one. Austin had received information about the conman's current data even earlier. As is customary for foreigners, they were sent to the local police department, and they're carefully placed in the database where they could be accessed by any employee if necessary. Austin was faced with a difficult choice. On the one hand, he had to inform his boss that a trivial 3-letter agency assignment had solved a serious crime. On the other hand, he could take all the credit for the tracker to someone else. No, that's not what he'll do. Like a hunter, he would rush fearlessly at his prey and throw it at the colonel's feet. You should be lucky, the interrogator said to the invisible interlocutor. After that sleepover, she never asked him for help again. Luck likes preparation, and I've been preparing for it for 10 years, no less. So he now knew the exact day and hour when the crook's accomplice would come for the money. Friday, 4:00 p.m., give or take. The interrogator decided to rent a car share for the day to go out. He didn't have his own car, of course. Park across the street at 2:00. And wait. To ambush him, Austin took a day off work. His boss looked at him with round eyes, but the interrogator was adamant. I apologize, Austin said, adjusting his glasses. But I've got a month's worth of time off. I'm only asking for 1 day. And what is it that you want to do so badly? For the first time in the years of their acquaintance, a slight smile ran across his face. Is it really a woman? You guessed it, said the interrogator. She came here, a woman from out of town. She asks me to take her to the historical center, to take her to the bridge. Well, you get the picture. All right, said the boss, but just 1 day, and to come to work as usual at 7:40. Is that clear? That's right, Austin replied. When he got to his room in the communal apartment, he couldn't calm down for a long time. He replayed the smallest details of his operation in his head, how he would take down the crook. From the back, of course, how he'd put the bracelets on him, load him into a car share car. Of course, police regulations required at least 2 officers to both apprehend and escort criminals. But sometimes instructions could be ignored. Austin also longed for Selena. Why didn't I give her what she wanted yesterday? He thought, I'd basically wanted the same thing. However, as soon as he apprehends the crook and solves the most complicated crime alone, he is sure to get a promotion, and with it a raise in salary, a nice apartment and women. It is only necessary to be a little patient. With these thoughts, the policeman fell asleep and woke up only by the alarm clock. The interrogator could not wait. He immediately rented a car, not some budget Volkswagen Polo, but a luxury red Ford Mustang. It didn't have car share stickers on it, so it would attract a little less attention. Plus, this car had no rear doors, so the twisted criminal wouldn't be able to get away with it. Although the interrogator had originally planned to set up an ambush at 2:00 in the afternoon, he decided not to delay. Already at 10:00 in the morning, his Ford was parked across the street from the office of the insurance company. He decided not to eat at all, but to drink water in small sips, so that his physiological needs would not become an obstacle to his triumph. Austin sat in the car and waited. It turns out that ambushes are very tiring. There were dozens and hundreds of people walking past him. It wasn't the busiest place, but New York was never empty. He watched them, trying to memorize details. The seat in the car was very comfortable, and even after 2 hours from the beginning of the ambush, neither his back nor his legs hurt. From time to time, the policeman started the engine and turned on the massage mode. Yeah, he thought, if I were to sit in an ambush, it would be in a vehicle like this. It's a dream. Well, soon he'll be able to afford a nice car too. Maybe he'll even have a driver in his new position. Not a personal driver, of course, but that's okay. So he could dial him and say, Jack, 5 minutes. He was snapped out of his pleasant thoughts by a strange picture. No way. Austin, an interrogator with 8 years' experience, couldn't believe his eyes. Into the office of the insurance company walked Selena. She was looking around restlessly, and she also wore glasses. But having seen the face once, he would never forget this woman. It's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. What was she doing in the office? Austin got out of the car, ran across the road, and lurked at the side. He pretended to watch his smartphone, but he hadn't even unlocked the screen. It had been quite a while, 30 or 40 minutes, when a woman came out of the office. She was holding 2 large bags in her hands, and judging by the change in her gait, it was hard for her to walk. The interrogator followed her. There can be no doubt she took the money herself. How did he miss the widow? The triumph of her apprehension could hardly compare with the capture of the ringleader. The husband must have risen from the dead and persuaded his wife to help him. Well, we must act. The interrogator quickened his pace. Selena, Austin said as he approached his ward. Svetochka, where are you going? The woman set down her bags and turned around. There was no worry, fear, or doubt on her face. Just a huge smile from ear to ear. Suddenly, Selena raised her hand so sharply that Austin didn't even have time to blink an eye, and the light went out for the inquirer. Selena now felt deceived twice. First, it turned out that her hubby wasn't dead, and then the interrogator, who looked like an ordinary nerd, was squeamish about her gorgeous body. She's still full of life. So Selena decided she had to do something on her own. Finding Peter was easy. All the information she needed was in the inquirer's cell phone. When he denied her sex and retreated, he'd forgotten it. Plus, his screen lock is a simple zipper. That's the first thing that popped into her head. In a separate file that was in the open apps, she found a notepad where her and her husband's details were written. Even the name of the hotel and the room. Getting past the desk clerk proved to be an easy task. She just walked forward toward the stairs and no one called out to her. It must not be customary to ask guests questions. When she got to the 3rd floor, she was lucky again. Walking down the hallway was her husband. She ran up to him and slapped him in the face. Peter stood there like a thunderstruck man. It wasn't her who saw the dead man, it was him. He rubbed his cheek and remained silent. He hadn't changed a bit, he was still handsome. How could she not have noticed that wormhole in him? How could she have come up with such a plan? And all for what? For money? Well, Selena said, looking at her husband, that's how you are with me. I've already buried you, and you're safe and sound. The man was confused. His eyes ran left and right down the corridor. Let's move away, he said, and pulled her to the side. But the woman pulled away and pushed him away. No. Selena was indignant. I have to see her. To see my daughter. The one you took from me. Svetochka, he said in a languid voice. It's a very long, scary and fantastic story. I don't even know how to convince you to believe me. I'm guilty, yes guilty, but not in the way you might think. I'm in no hurry, the woman replied. Come on, tell me your fantastic story, before I call the police to put you in jail. How did you find me? He asked. Peter, aka Nicholas, aka Mickey, couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. He knew that his ex-girlfriend had left Peter. He was convinced that they would never cross paths in this huge city. And Selena kept silent. She didn't want to tell him about the interrogator. The insurance company called me, she blurted out. Peter's face twisted in a grimace of rage and fear. He turned pale and his lips turned blue. What did you tell them? He asked in a whisper. Nothing, the woman shrugged. Said I'd be sure to get the money. I don't need it, you know. Thank God, he exhaled. You sure you didn't say anything? No, Selena replied, and decided to change the unpleasant subject. So that's all you care about. What about my feelings? Peter smiled. His face brightened, his lips red again, and his eyes. It seemed to her that they were filled with love again. He took her elbow in a gentle gesture, she couldn't find the strength to push him away. She wanted to burst into tears, but the woman pulled herself together. "Let's go outside," he asked. "Let's go for a walk, have some coffee." "No," Selena cut Selena off. "I have to go inside right now to look at her." "Maria is asleep," Peter said. "Please listen to me. Did you know that I was thinking about you? For example, you sold the apartment. So you followed me." The woman was surprised. "Not sold, but mortgaged." "It doesn't matter," my husband said. "I mean, I was going to come out to you myself. In just a few days." When they went outside, they were immediately blown away by the cold St. Petersburg wind. "It's no different here." They crossed the road and sat down in one of the coffee shops. "I don't understand one thing," Selena said. "What kind of husband are you to me, ex-husband or not? I'm officially a widow, by your grace." "Don't scold me," Peter asked. "You'll find out now." A little sooner than I expected, but... And he did tell her a story. As fantastic as Julienne's grandmother's story, but as Selena listened to her husband, she believed him more and more, and by the end of the story she doubted everything but Peter's honesty. Gradually, her eyes returned to normal. Some kind-hearted people brought him to the toilet of the cafe, where the interrogator washed his face for a long time. The pain was unbearable, but the cause was not a chemical burn. No, with Selena, his career rushed past him, and she'd blasted him in the face like a wild animal. But the problems didn't end there. Pulling out his cell phone, Austin saw a dozen missed calls. He couldn't hear the calls because he had set his smartphone to silent mode. They were dialed by the same person who signed his name simply as Chief. Had someone reported to the police that an unknown woman had sprayed tear gas in a police officer's face? "Hello," said the interrogator, trying to put a relaxed tone to his voice. "What's up, slacker?" roared the chief. "Have you had enough of your women?" "Not yet," replied Austin. "What happened? What's wrong?" The warden shrieked. "He's still asking." "To the department. To the department, quickly." The interrogator had no way of knowing where he was. He even had to turn on the navigator to figure it out. Yeah, right next to the insurance office. Someone must have seen it when that woman sprayed gas in his face and helped him to the bathroom. His eyes were still watering, so Austin didn't want to drive the rental car. He called a cab. The interrogator walked into the department looking like he was going to the scaffold. "What do I do?" "Deny it. He'll never admit he was trying to catch a con man. There's no report, no paperwork. It's all in his head. He'll write a detailed report that he decided to follow a suspicious woman and she sprayed him in the face." "Hello," Austin said innocently, walking into the supervisor's office. "You wanted to see me?" Surprisingly, the colonel was sitting modestly in his chair, and on the chair of the head sat some red-haired man, and not just sitting, but throwing his feet on the table, unheard of impertinence. "Showed up," said the warden. "Hero lover, you've had enough, haven't you? Look who's here for you." Austin looked at the red-haired man. He didn't look like a very nice man. A crumpled sweater, a shabby jacket, boots with huge soles. But since he not only took the chair of the chief, but also threw his feet on the table, the man is not easy. It was evident from the prickly eyes. "Hello," the little man said, removing his feet. "Hello," replied the interrogator. "With whom do I have that honor?" "It's Fox," said the warden, and turned off your pontoon cutter. "A fox?" Austin was surprised. It looked human. "That's my call sign," the man explained. "Does Fox have a name?" The interrogator insisted. "Names are not allowed for operatives," said the guest, standing up. "Oh, you screwed up, Captain. You screwed up." The colonel took out a handkerchief and began to wipe his face restlessly. Sweat was dripping from his forehead. So not only did they know about his shame, Austin must have violated something that made the three-letter office come to the house in person, and all alone. "I don't know what you're talking about," the interrogator shrugged. "I got the day off today." I'll do whatever I want." "Shut up," shouted the colonel. "Are you playing games here? You and I are no longer in the same boat. I've said it all. I've said it all. That this is amateur hour, from start to finish. You're no longer with us, Austin." "Am I fired?" Austin asked. He felt sick to his stomach. "Fired." Fox mocked him and strode toward the door. He grabbed the handle. "Did you think you'd get off that easy? Follow me quickly." I'm not going," the inquirer said. "I'm not going anywhere." "Go on, take care of yourself," the operative replied. "Yes, go." The chief put an end to his ambitions. "Go yourself, or I'll tell our people and they'll bring you out in bracelets." To be honest, I would have thrown you in the monkey house. It was only now that Austin realized the gravity of what was happening. It seems he's not just fired anymore. Would the policeman of yesterday now become a prisoner? Austin felt scared and sweaty. Selena took the interrogator down with ease. Her hand was being pulled by the gigantic sum of $1 million. Yeah, Peter's plan was good. How clever of him to set her up to suffer, grief-stricken, and so that no one would ever think that her emotions might not be real. What a scoundrel, thought Selena. I almost lost my mind. And still what a man. He rented her an apartment 2 blocks from the insurance office, and she had already met Maria. The girl said some strange things to her. She even looked at her with suspicion. Well, that's okay. The baby will get used to it. It's good that they're together again. Now she has money. And put it in the bank? I don't think you can carry that kind of money on board. It went like clockwork. Selena blurted out as she entered the apartment. "Did you take it?" her husband asked seriously. Selena wanted to hug and caress him, but he gently pushed her away and took the bag of money in his hand. He weighed it, figuring out how much cash there was. "How did you get there?" Peter said. "That's a heavy burden." "Yeah," Selena replied. "I'm exhausted. I thought I'd be right back." And there we'd be. "What about the policeman?" my husband asked. "How did you get around him?" "Just like you said," the woman grinned. "Pepper spray in the eyes. When he went for his face, I sprayed some more. And then some more. He's probably still waking up. Look, I'm such a criminal. Why don't we make this quick, honey?" "Yes, it's a serious article," Peter said thoughtfully, ignoring her words. He continued to admire the stacks of $5,000 bills. Assault on a police officer. Yes, with bodily harm. That's, real time. "I've been waiting for you," Selena said. "I'd had a lot of people asking for me, I knew you were alive. I took care of myself, But Peter's attention was consumed with money. He couldn't believe his scam had gone so easily. What remained was not the hardest part, but the time-consuming part, getting it all out of the country. He already had a plan. This time, he'd have to be honest. His tech company would buy nearly $100 million worth of luxury goods from the US, smuggle it out to Europe. "Why aren't you talking, my love?" Selena asked. "I'm talking to you." "I'm sorry, I got distracted," Peter smiled. "I wanted to tell you what a great job you did. You did great, just like we discussed." "I've been trying to talk you into it for half an hour," said the woman. "I haven't had sex in over a year, and you're not even listening to me." "Oh, I'm sorry," my husband replied, and something in his face changed. "Take a shower, sweetie. I'll get everything ready. Let's not rush into anything." Selena glared. Of course, he might not be so capricious and take her as is. But a shower wouldn't hurt. She wanted to wash away the horror of the past months. Burying her own husband and daughter, she was on the verge of despair. Peter had rented a nice apartment. The bathroom was state-of-the-art. She opened the shower door and pressed the massage mode, and small streams of water immediately rushed into her from all sides. It felt good. Selena remembered washing herself in the communal room a couple days ago and hitting on that policeman. Oh my God, it was disgusting to think about. Was she about to fall into Peter's arms? She rubbed the shampoo on her body and imagined with pleasure how he would caress her. What a man! He'd arranged everything so well. Meanwhile, Pega counted the stacks of money and made sure every dollar was there. Well, he was lucky to have Selena. She was the most honest and decent woman he'd ever met. He'd liked it at first, but then he'd gotten annoyed. A man can't be that good 24/7. At first, he thought of just leaving. Sooner or later, the police would have her in custody. What do they have on him? Nicholas Crass has impeccable credentials. There will be a real diplomatic scandal if he's detained. What's more, he's dead to everyone but this interrogator. But as far as Peter understood from his wife, this policeman was running the operation alone, without informing anyone. When he realizes he's been duped, he'll just throw the ends in the water. Selena struggled to get out of her thoughts and into the shower room. Not only was she clean now, but she smelled so exciting. Peter couldn't help himself. He knocked politely on the door. Oh, how gallant. Still the same. Come in, she called in a languid voice. Come in, my love, and rub my back. Peter took a step inside. He smiled and hid one hand behind his back. There must be a present in there. He stepped closer and held out a towel to her. Selena tossed it aside and showed her body in all its glory. She stroked her sides and hips erotically and tried to make a seductive movement. See how lucky you are to have a baby girl, she said playfully. Yes, he replied. Very lucky. I don't know how you're holding back, Selena said. That's a lot of willpower. I thought you were going to grab me right away and carry me to our bed. Patience, the man said. Patience, dear. What are you hiding behind your back? The woman asked. Very interesting. There was silence. Her husband looked at her without taking his eyes off her. She had seen that look before. At times like this, Selena usually shook his hand and asked him, What are you thinking about? He never answered. Now the pause lingered. Goodbye, my love, Peter said and removed his hand from behind his back. Selene's eyes widened with surprise and fear. She suddenly felt cold standing naked in front of the traitor. Fox drove like a real hooligan. He was driving an old Mercedes, which seemed to have a very powerful engine under the hood. The operative maneuvered through the rows, accelerated and braked sharply. He also kept looking at Austin and repeating, You're in trouble, Captain. Oh, you're in trouble. You're a captain. The interrogator decided not to answer. The fear had passed, and now he had both the will and the desire to act. They wouldn't charge him with anything. After all, he hadn't violated anything. Getting fired was probably the worst thing that could happen, unless something terrible happened. It's with me, Fox said as they entered a building with huge columns. The main office of the three-letter agency that everyone doesn't like to memorialize. The guard nodded and pressed a button, and the turnstile in front of Pavel turned green. Go, the operative ordered. Well, walk. Over there. He pointed to a dark corridor that ended in a metal door. Fox swiped his card, and the lock opened. Austin moved on. To both left and right were doors beyond number. As they walked down the corridor, the interrogator saw an interrogation room, just like in American movies. What interested? Smiled the operative. Do you know him? First time I've ever seen it, lied the interrogator. Well, talk, Fox sneered. Behind the glass was Nicholas, aka Peter, aka Mickey, aka God knows who else. So the con man had been apprehended after all. The coroner was relieved. There were two men sitting in front of the con man, questioning him. Fox swiped his card, pressed a button, and could hear what was being said behind the glass. Attempted murder. One of the investigators stretched out. Okay, he'd be running his scams like he always does. But no, he's getting wet. You're gonna be in jail for a long time if you don't cooperate with us. Murder? Nicholas asked with a slight accent and a smile. Do you think it's possible to kill with a stun gun? Yes, if you hit a wet body in the heart. blurted out the investigator. "You're such a bastard. It's good that this woman has a great health. She'll live." "I don't know what this is about," Nicholas yawned. "Wake me up when my lawyer gets here." The fox pressed the button again, and the room fell silent. He moved on, and Austin had no choice but to follow. They reached the end of the hallway. There was a video intercom in front of the door. The operative pressed the button, and it was as if his face had changed to a more welcoming one. "I brought you, Comrade Colonel." There was a beep, and the door opened. They went inside, walked past the reception area, where a pretty girl was sitting, only in a shirt with epaulettes. In the office sat a man with graying temples, curious eyes, and looked at his guest with interest. "Well," said the colonel, "the interrogator everyone's talking about. Have a seat, don't be shy. You almost ruined our operation. This is a major project, by the way." "Me?" the policeman interjected, picking out a chair. Talking to this big man was not like the execution he had so much dreaded. "I only wanted to apprehend a crook." "Imagine, so did we," said the big boss. "It turns out they wanted the same thing." "How did we step on each other's tails?" wondered Austin. "Agents don't sleep," the operative replied haughtily. "What, you thought you could outplay us, huh? We've had everything captured and intercepted for a long time." The colonel looked at his subordinate with disdain. He didn't seem to like the fact that he was speaking to the guest in such a tone. "Tell you what, Fox," said the warden. "Go on out the door. Go do your business, and we'll have a little chat." "Me?" the cop was surprised. "What's that?" "Get out," shouted the colonel, instantly losing patience. "Come on, argue with me, rookie. Leave us two alone, quick." Humiliated, Fox left the office. He looked at the policeman one last time with eyes full of hatred. The colonel rose from his leather chair and approached Austin, looked carefully into his eyes. The interrogator was embarrassed, took off his glasses, and began to wipe the glasses. "Brilliant work," he praised with a smile. "I mean it now, without irony. To solve such a crime in just 3 days." "It was an accident," said the inquirer. "Besides, I missed it. I understand Selena almost died because of me." "You missed it because you had neither the forces nor the means," the colonel said seriously. "Remember, every operation requires cover and support. One is not a warrior in the field. Is that clear to you?" "Yeah." "Can I ask you a question?" Austin said. "How did you find this Peter Nicholas? Where did he go wrong?" "Still on women," the colonel grinned. "Our swindler began his affair with a certain Barbara, a hotel porter. Initially, he'd offered to play the role of ex-wife to her. And then the real Mrs. Selene got involved. That's your fault, Comrade Captain. Such a valuable witness should be led to the end." I understand," nodded the colonel. "There weren't enough forces and resources. That's why you should have taken the matter upstairs instead of playing the hero. So when Barbara saw her man with her ex, that's when her patience ran out. And we have a special relationship with hotels. You know, things happen in hotels. They owe us 1,000 times over. I couldn't believe it when I saw the picture. Mertz, my ass. So we played this blitz. And to me, "Is there a complaint against me?" the inquirer asked. "No," replied the warden. "It was I who asked Fox to deliver you. And he probably got scared. Maybe even showed his badge. Don't pay any attention to him. He's a competent officer, but he's not very discerning when it comes to achieving his goals. Sometimes I chose his call sign, by the way." "What about Selena?" the inquirer asked. "Did that scoundrel really want to kill her?" "Imagine that," the colonel said seriously. "He's very, very clever. A stun gun, you know, is not much of a weapon. Unreliable and cumbersome, but it can be used to kill. Of course, it would still have to be proved. Let the investigation work." "Well then," Austin said, getting up from his chair, "it was nice to meet you, of course, and to get off scot-free. But it's time for me to get back into my routine." especially since I'm not getting fired and nothing terrible has happened. What, you want to look for a criminal trail in trivial debts again? Smiled the colonel. I have a better idea, as they say. I have a vacancy in the department. Of course, we won't take it right away. You have to retrain, take exams. It's nothing personal, Captain, but after 8 years in the line, some people even forget the American alphabet. The interrogator glowed. This was the chance that comes once in 10 years. Soti was right, and the case was indeed a winnable one. Austin adjusted his spectacles, straightened up. But don't think that we have a resort here, the colonel continued. People here don't see their wives for weeks at a time. There's plenty of work. Salary? Well, better than yours, of course. But not a gold mine. You'd better think about it before you take it. If I submit my documents tomorrow, will it be okay? Said the former interrogator. Maybe you could give me the phone number of the head of the personnel department right away, so that I don't have to bother you unnecessarily. The colonel smiled and shook Austin's hand. Well, as they say here, welcome to the force, son. By the way, what do you think of the call sign Cupid? You look a little like him, don't you think?